Hey, it's Silver, and this is Dust and Neon, a top-down shooter that's going for the whole Weird West type of setting, which I gotta admit I have a bit of a weakness for. I'm always a fan of, like, Wild West, but off in some way kind of settings, and in this case, it's Wild West, but robots and mad scientists, which I'm definitely a fan of. And the overall gameplay loop is actually something similar to Synthetic, honestly. It's a game about really fast gunfights, like very lethal, over very quickly, but interspersed with relatively slow exploration and a focus on reloading. You'll notice that in this game, every time you reload, your weapon actually pops up on the right side of the screen, and you have to individually tap R to load each bullet, whatever it is, a shotgun shell, a rifle bullet, it doesn't matter, you have to individually load each one, which I think is really cool, and it means that all the different varieties of weapons have completely different models and different reloading animations and stuff for them. So you might have a triple-barreled shotgun where you have to triple tap R to reload all three, or you might have a revolver with like 8 bullets in a big square that you sort of reload in like a chunky pixel square. It's a really cool idea, honestly, and it's presented very well. But as I mentioned, gunfights in this game are very fast. Despite the fact that your movement speed is quite slow and quite tactical, honestly, the combat itself is over really quickly because nothing really lasts that long in this game, including you. So you're meant to take cover behind stuff. There actually is an automatic cover system. It simply works by moving next to something that's tall enough, and your character will automatically crouch and take cover, and bullets will whiz over your head. And as soon as you hold right-click, you'll pop out of cover and aim. You can fire without right-clicking to aim, but it's dumb because you will miss. You're very inaccurate by doing that, and the ammo economy in this game is a very important thing. You actually can't hold very much ammo for all of your weapons. You have 3 different weapon slots, a revolver slot, a shotgun, and a rifle, and you can hold one of each in each slot. And although you can hold a fairly sizable amount of revolver rounds, like several reloads worth usually, depending of course on the weapon that you have, you can only hold a small handful of shotgun shells and rifle bullets. There are tons and tons of just ammo crates littering all over the place that could contain just a little bit, a smattering of ammo for whatever you're missing at the time. And the whole idea of the game is you're constantly scrounging because there's a lot of enemies. There are way more enemies in each level than there are bullets to kill them on you when you start the level. So you're always running around trying to find ammo and being very careful in combat to only squeeze off those shots that you know are going to hit. This is not the kind of game that you can spray randomly and hope to win, because you will run out of ammo very, very quickly, and they will not. So you've definitely got to be careful when it comes to the overall firefight sort of structure of this game, which I really appreciate because it gives it a very tactical feel. It means you are slowly crawling around, waiting for enemies, and then looking for points to snap to keep yourself safe, and then pop them all off from behind cover or whatever you need to do quickly, and then move on. It's a very satisfying game to play because of that feeling of executing a battle very well, you know what I mean? Where you pull off just the exact right number of shots to kill just the right number of enemies with like perfect accuracy and efficiency, and then you move on without taking a single hit, and you feel really good about it. It's that kind of game, very much like Synthetic. Now, you actually have a hub that you return to after every mission, and in this hub there are several different things you can do. There are several upgrade systems and some other stuff that you can get. You'll have to beat some bosses to get these blueprints to unlock most of the features, but you'll do that relatively quickly. Most of these features you'll have for most of the game. And at first, you simply have a free revolver. You just have a slot with a free revolver in it that you can get, and if you die, you do lose all of the weapons that you're holding, although all of your resources back at base, your money and stuff, stays. You don't lose that. You only lose what you're carrying on the mission at the time that you haven't brought back to base yet. So basically, killing enemies and looting containers gets you cash, and killing enemies also gets you cores. And every time you return to base, you deposit your cash and cores in the base's stash, and that stays safe whether you die or not. But when you die, you do have to restart from no weapons at all, so you'll be limited to, at first, the free revolver that's just chilling on the counter in the hub area. But when you can use these cores to upgrade various stuff around your base. So you can, for instance, get a free shotgun and eventually a free rifle as well, so you can actually start with all 3 weapons every time you die. You can also gain the ability to buy back the weapons that you had when you died, so that you can use your stashed money to actually purchase one or multiple of the things that you had if you really, really liked them and they were particularly good. You'll also get these things called mind blowers eventually, which are like little chips that you can insert into your head, and they give you various passive benefits and tend to be very powerful, but they're also very expensive and only last for one mission. So generally these are the kinds of things that you're going to buy before you go on a hard difficulty mission or before you try a boss battle, something like that, something that you expect to need a little bit extra something in order to get yourself through. You can also eventually unlock this snake oil vendor, which will sell you some tonics, some cocktails, stuff like that. You can just purchase these. They're a lot less expensive than the mind blowers individually, but they also tend to have less powerful effects, so that's not always the case. Some of the legendary rarity ones can do things like making you shoot multiple times per trigger pull and stuff like that, which gets pretty ridiculous if you have the right equipment. And those usually last anywhere from 1 to 3 missions. And there's also a vendor outside, a gun vendor, that will have one of each weapon slot available for sale every time you go to him of a different rarity that you can buy if you find something that's better than what you currently have and have the money for it and wish to shell out. Then you choose a mission, and there are a fair number of different mission types to choose from, as well as 4 different sort of spots on the world map, 4 different biomes, each with their own tile set and challenges to come up against. And the various mission types are things like sabotage bases, where you have to defeat large waves of enemies that are guarding like this generator thingy, and then just blow up the generator and repeat that multiple times across a large sort of sprawling level to find all of them, usually 2 or 3 of them. There's also stuff like train heists, where you have to go along this constantly moving set of trains, usually like 3 or 4 trains all parallel to each other, and you eventually have to get to a safe on one of the cars of the trains, loot it, and then escape. There are also missions where you have to take out specific targeted enemies, missions where you have to go to a certain area and kill all the enemies in that area to clear it out, missions where there are these explosive barrels you have to find around the level and take out, and even boss levels, of course, as well. Now, the bosses are locked behind rank. As you just kill enemies and stuff and complete missions, your rank will go up. This is basically like a level system. And as far as I'm aware, there aren't any like intrinsic stats that increase with your rank. Like, for instance, your health, I'm pretty sure stays the same. Rank doesn't increase that or anything. It's just like a content unlocking idea, basically. So as you increase in rank, you'll sometimes get new weapon types that can be found as loot and in the store and stuff like that. And you'll also unlock at certain thresholds new boss battles to actually go and face. And one of the interesting ideas this game has that I actually really like is that it doesn't make you repeat boss battles. So even though there's technically sort of like a form of permadeath, you don't actually restart a run from scratch when you die. All of the progress that you've made up until that point remains, and if you've beaten a boss and you're going on to the second boss, then when you revive, you still have beaten the first boss. You don't have to do it again if you don't want to. Instead of needing to refight them, instead they unlock again later on as you continue to rank up, and they're harder that time. So basically, fighting bosses again is optional, and they're more and more difficult every time you do it for better rewards. Also, I should mention, every time you rank up, you'll get 2 talent points that you can spend. There is a dual-sided talent tree, one for offense and one for defense, and you can upgrade various talents along the way, like extra maximum health, extra held ammo, certain gun types, stuff like that. It's a relatively basic talent tree, but it does the job. And that's pretty much the structure of the game. You just take on various missions in order to rank yourself up and find new bosses to fight and go through the story by actually fighting these bosses and punctuating new developments in the story by finding new ones to face and things, and then just keep going through all the biomes of the world until you've faced all of the evil robot masters that you were set out to face in the first place, and all the while, finding new guns and upgrading your base and stuff like that. So far so good. It's a pretty solid package, and in my opinion, it doesn't actually do anything all that wrong. There are some choices that I think could be done a little bit differently, but overall, I can't point at any individual thing and say that's bad and it ruins the experience. I think it is a perfectly competent game. However, I do have a major problem with it, and that's the price. If this game cost like $15, then I would say this amount of content is actually pretty appropriate for that price. However, they're charging $30 for it, which I think is it's too much, simply put. I think that's just too high for the amount of content the game currently has. You see, games like this live or die on variety. These sorts of roguelites, that's the thing that keeps them going. You want a game with tons of stuff to do, bosses to fight, enemies to face, guns to find. It's all about the variety, the build variety, the run variety. That's what keeps these games going. And in this game's case, it's just very lacking in that department. There's a very small number of weapon types to find. There aren't that many. You'll run dry very quickly. There are relatively few enemy types, and the bosses are actually really fun, and I really like the refighting mechanic, but there are only only a few of those as well. So overall, you get an experience that becomes quite repetitive quite quickly because there's just not much variety. There aren't even things like active or passive items to find and use or anything like that to sort of accentuate a build. There really isn't a build in this game, it's just find 3 weapons, and the 3 weapon types, although are interesting and the reloading mechanic is very cool and well implemented, there's not a lot of variety to them. And if you combine that with some other things, like the fact that the talent trees are very basic and simple and just kind of boring, honestly. They're just like, you know, small percentage increases to very basic things. They don't have anything particularly exciting or interesting about them. They're just very little incremental upgrades that barely mean anything, which is kind of the worst type of talent tree, I feel. And then there's the fact that the mind blowers and the snake oil are basically the same thing. They're just passive effects that improve you in small incremental ways. I don't really see the need for those to be 2 separate mechanics when they basically do completely identical things, and it doesn't really make any sense for them to not be rolled up together into one more unified version of that mechanic. It's just that splitting those into 2 separate mechanics that both do the same thing kind of feels odd, and again, it kind of feels like you're grasping for variety with these mechanics that just sort of have a very basic function and don't really do a lot that's colorful or interesting, and that means there isn't really any like build variety in this game or a whole lot of run variety to be had. So I feel that because of that, even though that it doesn't do anything wrong, even though that it's definitely a perfectly fine, competent game, it does not justify its $30 price tag. I mean, if you look at its contemporaries, other games in this similar genre, you've got stuff like Gungeon, Voidigo, Neon Abyss, Synthetic 2. These games all cost less than this one and have a lot more variety than this one, which makes this particular one a lot harder to recommend because in a vacuum, it's a totally fine game with some neat ideas, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in a crowded genre with a lot of other games that have a lot more going on for less money. So overall, I would say wait on Dust and Neon. It is competent and it does have some fun ideas, but I think it's charging too much for too little. I would say wait for some large updates. Maybe they decide to overhaul some mechanics or add a bunch of new content. That's always possible and could very much help to justify its price. Or, of course, wait for a sale, because it's not a bad game to buy on sale considering it's actually pretty solid as a core experience. It just maybe costs a little too much. So thank you guys very much for watching. I will link you in the description below this video to the Steam store page for this game if you wish to check it out yourself. Keep an eye on those updates, and I'll see you guys next time.